Apothecary Diaries is filled with many great characters who often go about their lives in the story with a pretty positive look on their face. Heck, even the face of power for the entire kingdom cracks a smile from time to time. But there's one underlying theme that's popped up now and again throughout the story that's pretty gloomy in nature. What I'm talking about, of course, is the theme of loss and how it affects the characters in the story, not only in the short term but for the grander narrative as well. And there's a lot of loss going around this anime, both through death and some other less permanent means. Nevertheless, the impact loss has throughout is undeniable, and I think it's one of the more important tools used in making Apothecary Diaries as consistently engaging as it is. So before we lose you, let's dive right into today's video.
今までの帝の巫女が3人とも生まれてからだんだん弱ってなくなったんだって。おかしいと思わない？ 3人とも?
And then that signals the start. Taking a look back at the very start of the series, the story of the Inner Palace was already heading in a grim direction. Two of the Emperor's high consorts had been struck with terrible misfortune, with both of their children heavily ill with a mysterious sickness. Incidentally, this is when the story of Maomao properly gets underway. Having been entered into the Inner Palace against her will, she happened to hear about this mysterious disease. Later, she even saw for herself the distress the high consorts were in as she witnessed Liwa strike Gyokyo out of misplaced anger. She had thought the illness that befell her son was a curse set by Gyokyo herself out of jealousy. The hypothesis doesn't hold up though, since Gyokyo's child is also suffering. Whatever the case, Maomao easily uses her knowledge to figure out what's going on and how to stop the illness from progressing further. Poetically, as Liwa suffers from both illness and paranoia from jealousy, it's her very own cousin Shin that disposes of Maomao's warning that could have changed her child's fate. And so, ultimately, Liwa's child passes away, and Gyokyo survives with the help of Maomao's intel. It's a tragic end that hits us right at the start of the series, but as we'll come to know as we keep on watching, life goes on in the Inner Palace. Where one life ends, another begins, and Maomao, after saving Gyokyo's child, gets her dream job as a poison tester.
毒味薬薬やお前の仕事だ。
毒味薬
Meanwhile, Liwa could not be any deeper into despair. Still suffering from illness, she's brought to the brink of death, unable to even stand from her bed. But as fate would have it, Maomao gets tasked to nurse Liwa back to proper health. What she discovers though is that this is no longer just a matter of a weakened body, but also of a weakened spirit. A mother's worst nightmare is the loss of a child. What's more, as a consort to the Emperor, one could say her very reason for existing is to fulfill her role as a mother. But now all that's been taken away from her. Tragically, the very source of the illness that ended the life of her child and crippled her own health even now is that of her makeup. That is to say, it was her physical love towards her child that brought the poison unto him.
そのうち全身に毒が回るだろう。よかったな。これでお前も綺麗になれるぞ。お慕いするリファ様と同じだ。
It's only through Maomao's dedicated effort and care that eventually Liwa is able to see the silver lining in life once again, to continue to live. That is the best she can do in honor of the child she had lost. Accepting fate, giving punishment to yourself in a bedridden state, that's not the life her child would have wanted for her. Fast forward over to season 2 and we see a much stronger version of Liwa. Able to stand up for herself and others with pride, she takes care of her cousin Shin with a ready iron hand. She's no longer the consort she once was, who was easily paranoid and envious of others like consort Gyokyo. It wasn't just Maomao who gained from the tragedy at the start of the story. Liwa is only able to be who she is now because of all that pain, living up to her name as the wise consort. We can see from her character that sometimes growth can sprout from even the gravest misfortunes. All that is good to hear too. Especially since there's a lot of that going on around in the Inner Palace. Before we move on to seeing more characters cry a river, remember to flood this video with a like, share, and subscribe if you want to see more awesome content like this one. And make sure to join the comments below to share what you thought of how Apothecary Diaries handles loss.
すなわち限定の弟君と同じ時期。東宮時代の子はその一人だけ。妃もアード妃だけだった。
Once a mother, always a mother. As we've talked about plenty of times, Apothecary Diaries has a ton of amazing, unforgettable characters. But for me, I think one of the most slept on has to be Aduo. She rarely makes an appearance in the series, but when she does, it's often just as mesmerizing as her physical beauty. Her most notable appearance, however, has to be way back in season 1 during the whole storyline surrounding the servant who was found dead in the moat. But this isn't the loss we're focusing on today. Deeper into the arc, we learn of how Aduo's son was accidentally poisoned by her most trusted servant. And while Aduo was ignorant of the actual cause of her son's death, this still depressed her to an extreme degree, and possibly changed her mentality moving forward. You see, this story isn't as straightforward as one might think. The servant may have kept the poisoning a secret, but that wasn't the only truth being hidden in plain sight. As we come to know later, the child Aduo actually lost that day wasn't her own biologically. That baby was poisoned by honey was actually the real imperial brother, and Aduo's son is none other than Jinshi. It's a pretty complex situation, but due to the imperial brother's birth at the same time, Aduo was forced to go along with the switch in babies. All this to say, Aduo went through a hell of an emotional roller coaster. After having to part ways with her actual son, she was given another to care for and to treat as her own, only for that child to lose his life in a freak honey incident. It's a bit of a challenge for anime onlys, but if you read between the lines, you can figure out that Aduo is actually the Emperor's true love. Having grown up with the Emperor, Aduo also loves him to a degree, but not as much in the sexual sense. That being said, they did, as we know, end up together, and she was a consort for the Emperor before he even became the Emperor with a whole harem and whatnot, if that makes sense.
水の中は寒かっただろうな。苦しかっただろうな。
In actuality though, she always preferred being a free spirit away from responsibilities like being a consort. However, things changed once she got a taste of motherhood, and that didn't simply start after she lost her surrogate son. As we saw in season 1, she at some point got pretty close to the young consort Lishu. Turns out both she and the good emperor decided to protect her from the previous degenerate emperor. Basically, she ended up acting like a mother to Lishu and the inner palace. Thankfully, her story of motherhood doesn't end there, because even after she's graduated from being the pure consort of the inner palace, she found new responsibility in caring for certain kids who have lost their homes. Namely, the kids of the Shi clan at the end of season 2. That's right, after Lolan and Maomao do the impossible of getting these kids cleared of treasonous charges, the kids are luckily able to live out a good life under the care of the very MILF that gave birth to Jinshi.
Yukiko.
Sometimes goodbyes cut just as deep.
止水の死体は雪をいくらかき分けても見つからなかったそうだ。
By the end of season 2, you'd think we'd already have our fill of tragic endings with what went down with Lolan's dramatic dance number. Unfortunately for us, the Apothecary Diaries had one last thing up its sleeve. After Maomao's return from the drawn-out Fox Village arc, things didn't return exactly to how things were. After Jinshi took up the mantle of Imperial Brother to command the secret army, he has been unable to return to the Inner Palace. As such, Maomao had no work to return to and simply went back to the Pleasure District where she had spent most of her life. It's during this time that she receives a letter written by Xiaolan, her longtime friend who's been a warm staple for as long as the series has run. Sadly, as Maomao reads the letter, she, along with many of us, can't help but let loose with a bit of ice sweat. A character that's always been a bubbly presence, providing ample rest in between the dramatic story we've come to love, is now gone. And it's not necessarily in a tragic sense either. You thought I was gonna say she was dead, wasn't she? Xiaolan has simply left the Inner Palace, now working as a maid for a more well-off lady. It's a bittersweet moment when you can feel proud of Xiaolan finding a proper place in the world, while also feeling devastated at the fact that all those fun Maomao and Xiaolan moments are unlikely to happen again. It's a farewell that, while not permanent, signals the start of a new chapter in each of their lives.
私たちがいなくなって湯殿で一人一生懸命に働くシャオランをなんとなく放っておけなかったみたいだ。
And as you may come to know in your own journey in everyday life, losing moments can be one of the most devastating losses there is. Nevertheless, after having to go through the pain of losing two of her closest friends in quick succession, Maomao's future is now just that little bit uncertain. I'm sure the pain and realizations will allow Maomao to enjoy her life more moving forward, not taking things for granted and such. But as a fan of the series, it is exciting to think about how the landscape of Season 3 will look without the bubbly face of Xiaolan and even Shisui showing up now and again. Maybe all this just means there's more space in maomao's schedule for Jinshi to take a bigger piece of real estate. And I, for one, can't wait to see what that looks like.
やつれた顔で何言ってんだこいつ。いかん。
If all this talk of loss got you wanting for more, do consider leaving a super thanks on this video. It would really mean a lot. As always, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment down below what you thought of today's video. Did Xiaolan's goodbye hit you as hard as it hit me? If not, what scene in the series hit the hardest for you? And who do you think is up next on the Apothecary Diaries shopping vlog? We can't wait to hear it. As always, thanks for watching. We'll be seeing you again next time.